think a lot of artists sort of try and break things down. I remember reading about Keith Richards from the Rolling Stones, and he said he liked to listen to records over and over again and try and figure out how the musicians came up with that sound or came up with that chord. And he would, you know, work so hard to break it down and figure out how they did it. And I find myself when I'm walking through town staring at people with great hats on. And I think they think I'm staring at them, but I'm staring at their hat. And I try and figure out, what's the pattern for that? How did they do that? I've been in this studio for about 4 years now. I used to be across the hall. And it was so nice to move into a space with natural light because I didn't have any before. And this window is so wonderful. And then I can watch people out the window when I want to take a break. A woman ordered 2 hats for me, and she's in a big hurry because it's cold there. So I suggested, since it's cold, that I would do a flannel lining. And she was excited about that. So I made the lining with this flannel backing just to make it a little bit warmer. I'm just going to pin these 2 together. And because this is waxed, I can't iron it. So I have to press the seams by hand with this tool. And it's kind of time consuming, but I like the seams to be nice and flat. So I rub them with this. Normally I would press it with the iron, but I can't do that. So just get this pinned into place. So I just decided I wanted to do this, and I thought, well, someone's got to teach me how to sew, because I don't know how. So I hired a friend who was an expert seamstress to teach me how to sew. She taught me how to pull a thread in fabric to find the true grain, and just really beautiful finishes, how to do a rolled hem by hand. I'm so thankful that I got her to teach me to sew, because she was a very good teacher. So that just gives it a nice finish, and it holds the seam down on the other side. And YouTube is such a bonus right now to, because I can look online and see how to use these straw braid sewing machines and see how the experts do it and see how you thread it, maintain it, oil it, all that kind of stuff, which is really great because they're fairly rare machines. I really enjoyed working at the festival because there were such wonderful artisans there, and there still are, but the ones who were there at the time taught me, so they were so generous with their knowledge. I mean, I kept this knowledge book, and every time someone taught me something, I'd write it down. And so I wouldn't forget, and I didn't want to have to keep asking people the same thing over and over, because I really didn't know that much when I started there. I learned on the job. The sizing that you use on hats normally is really toxic. Unfortunately, in the old days, they used mercury in their solution that they would spray onto the hats. And over years and years of being exposed to that mercury, the hat makers would literally lose their minds. And they described them, wandering down the streets and completely out of it because of the mercury that they'd been absorbing for all those years. So that's where the Mad Hatter came from. I do occasionally work with people locally, but for the most part, it's all online. I worked with the Websters and had some of my hats over there. And I love them. I love the Websters. It's such a great environment for the hats to be in because it's such beautiful handmade things there that they sell. Just gorgeous. So I'm in good company. History and fashion are fascinating. Victorian women were wearing those enormous feathered hats. You know what I mean? With the birds of paradise and the ostrich, and they were literally killing off the bird population. So the Audubon Society started right around that time in protest of all the birds being killed for these women's hats. And that's how it all got started, which is another interesting crossing of history and fashion, which I find so interesting. There's this great book here. Let's see. This is A Pageant of Hats, Ancient and Modern. And you would not believe what all is in here. But one of the things I loved in here was the chef's hat. And the chef's hat has 100 pleats in it to show that you know how to prepare eggs in 100 different ways, because that was what was considered being a master chef. So it's called a 100 pleater, and it's a chef's, the chef's hat with the 100 pleats. It actually means something. It means you can prepare eggs in 100 different ways, which is kind of great. Her head's a little small for this hat. This show called Crafty Wonderland that I went to in Portland, and I was selling my hats up there, and a woman came by from another booth, and she'd been kind of watching me, and she said, "You should make a waxed canvas cloche as a rain hat, and that would be a big seller." And I thought, that's a good idea. So I did. I like to use fabrics that breathe for the linings so that air can circulate. So I use cotton for the most part, or silk. This one's okay though, because since it's for warmth, the man-made fiber, will actually help her stay warmer with the lining. But yeah, like I said, this waxed canvas is food grade, so it's not full of chemicals, which is really important. Okay, so then here's the band that I'm going to make to go around the outside. So then what I'll do is go back and do a little stitch, like it looks like X's. It's called a catch stitch to hold this shut before I sew it on. And this will all be sewn on by hand. Do you know Project Runway and Tim Gunn? I love Tim Gunn, and I love listening to what he has to say. And he always says, don't make it too costumey. It's starting to look a little costumey, and then I think, oh, that's probably true of me too. I should probably challenge myself, like Tim Gunn challenges the designers to go beyond what they normally do. I wrote myself all these notes the first time I figured out what worked and what didn't work, and I still go back and look at those notes if it's been too long since I've made one. So 1 inch. Because sometimes you think you'll remember how you did something, and then you go to make it after 6 months and you think, wait, how did I do that? It's so frustrating. So I'm just going to slip this on to give you an idea of how it's going to look, because there's a lot of fussing and futzing around with it that I'll do. But you get the basic idea. I've been making these cloches for 10 years now, and they're great. I love them, but I think I'm in a rut. I love looking through these That's a great shape. That would be fun to start with, you know, and then make it more modern. I'm interested in taking vintage shapes and modernizing them, you know, using it as a basis, but then making a jumping off point rather than at the end. So that's an interesting challenge to me. I like minimalism. I like things very simple. I don't like a lot of decoration and frou-frou.
My mom's friend Shirley called my mom one morning and said, Samuel Jackson's on Good Morning America and he's wearing a corduroy hat. So I said, that's my hat. So I ran downstairs and we turned it on and there he was wearing my hat. I just couldn't believe it. It looked so good. I admire his style so much. I just think he's one of the most interesting dressing people. I'm so excited because he follows me on Instagram and likes my posts. And it just, you know, no matter how bad of a day you're having, when you see that Samuel Jackson liked one of your hats, it instantly makes you feel a lot better. So I'm just this small town, one-person shop, and it's just sort of a miracle that his lovely assistant found me